is a sorry. So he just starts that one for.
Bill, you might want to mute your mic there till we're ready.
Okay, it's 4:00. I see James is just walking in, so we'll give him a minute to get in here. We waited for you.
You didn't need to.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Lord, please continue to watch over all of us and allow us to make decisions that benefit the good citizens of this town and continue taking care of us in the future. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Comments from the audience. Mike, I see you signed up here.
I did.
Jump on up there.
I just want to comment, I know you're going to talk about a rate increase tonight for the water. And looking at the financials, it looks like cash reserves back in 07 for the water fund were $138,000. And this was in June of 07. In June of 08, they jumped up to $360,000. In June of 09, they jumped up to $351,000. Then coming forward in June of 2017, you're up to $2 million. And then in 18 and 19, you're around between 2.2 and 2.7 million. And June 30th of 2020, 2 years ago, you were up to 4 million. And now today, on I guess last month on the 30th of the month, you're up to 4.3 million. So I would ask, with increasing reserves, why we need an increase in the water rates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Darren, we'll move on to general manager report.
All right, I will kind of go through quickly what I've already written, but I think there's some significant things there. Number one, the Grain Belt Express. There has been legislation at the state level, House Bill 2005, that was trying to prevent that construction. There was some movements at the state level that said a single county could stop the work if they desired. The real concern, and it was a concern for everybody, even here, is the use of eminent domain to get that completed. What they found is they put some rules in place, but they grandfathered in anybody that had already had their permits and approvals through the Public Service Commission. And Grain Belt does have that. They have received all of those permits. They've met all of the requirements of the Public Service Commission. And so the legislation that was changed, there was some things done, will not harm or stop the Grain Belt Express. And so that's really, that's a very good news for us. Even with that, we're not going to see actual kilowatts delivered to Hannibal probably till sometime in 2026. So they still have a percent of the easements that they still have to acquire. They then have to build it. They then have to get the power to us. And so they're still several years away before that happens. But it is still moving forward, so that's good news for us, and we are thankful for that. There's the MISO capacity auction. We need to bring this to the attention of the community and you yourselves, the board. What happens is MISO is the organization that is responsible for the transmission of power for the mid-continental United States. It goes from Canada all the way through the Midwest, through ourselves, down into Texas, and even into Mexico just a little bit. And what they do is they are responsible for watching the generators and matching up that need of generators, plus the needs of transmission, plus the needs of the end user, such as ourselves, the people that burn the kilowatts, the power at the end of the line. Every year, they measure the amount of generation that area can generate. They then look at everybody on their worst day, at the hottest day or the coldest, whichever is going to use the most electricity, and then they compare those two numbers. And they then decide what's the cost of that generation for that capacity at that worst hour. And then we pay into that. A year ago, when they measured that, there was more generation than there was demand. This year, that changed. And it changed from approximately 8 megawatts from 12 over to now 8 under. That was a complete change of about 20 gigawatts of power. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it is there's actually generation that's being mothballed, taken out of use anymore. Anything that's coal has come under the gun, and they're starting to be taken offline. There's some older generation that's simply coming off. Having said that, the cost for us usually was around $10, $7 per megawatt. It has now gone to $236 per megawatt. That is going to cost us this coming year about $3.4 million, which was substantially more than we had anticipated and seen coming. We are going to be able to take those reserves that we have in the electric fund, and we're going to use that to offset that part of our bill, that capacity. That way our industries, that's our commercial, our residential folks are not going to feel that or see that. And that's exactly what that reserve was for. Now, there's some other things that are going on. We believe that switch of 20 megawatt, actually 20 gigawatts, I've got to get the verbiage correct, to go from 12 over to 8 under, it doesn't make sense. There are some of those things that they said were going to be coming offline. Well, they did, but there was more than that we didn't know about. There were some things in that auction and in that process that we do not believe are fair. When I say we, I'm talking about ourselves as that end distributor. We are working with MPUA. We have the attorneys there that we have drafted some letters. We are not the only state. We are in Region 5. There are several other regions that have the same concerns, and there will be action taken to help make sure that the future capacity auctions are done a little more fair and a little more accurately, but that's going to take some time. So I believe that there will be some court actions involved. There will be all kinds of things going on to help mitigate that. But for the immediate future, for this coming year, we're going to use our reserve funds to take care of that added cost so that our customers will not feel it from that at all. Now, that's the capacity portion of your bill. And that's not all of it. There still may be some other things, and I'll get to that in just a second. So any questions or comments on that, Miso?
Is the capacity always going to be in play, or is that capacity over a certain amount?
I'm not following your question. We always have a capacity charge. So when it comes to that capacity, what happens for us is we know that approximately 52 megawatts is our capacity. The worst day in summertime is roughly 52 megawatts. At that time, we've got 20 megawatts, which we know are going to be able to pull from Prairie State. We also have a hedge in there for another approximately 10 megawatts. So that differential, that capacity, we have to pay for it to keep it online and available all year long. So we know that additional, my math is going to get me in trouble here, 22 megawatts, we're going to have to pay for that no matter what all the time to make sure that it's available so that one-off generator that's sitting out there for 365 days but only generates for one, we keep them online and they're able to make their living sitting there waiting for us. So there's always going to be that. We had our generators that we had. They'd sat there and sat there and sat there, but they added to our capacity to some of that equation, but we always will have to pay for that capacity.
Whether we use any of it or not.
Whether we use it or not.
It's insurance.
It's insurance, yeah. And it's all, it is a good thing. This auction, in theory, what it does is it helps make people want to become a generator when generation is low. So with that number being so high, there should be some people out there that are saying, hey, it's going to now be worth taking and doing the fixes, doing what we have to do to become a generator again, because we can help start making money again. So it's a good thing that the change in that market helps to determine who gets into or out of that generation market. But we believe that it was a little bit offset this time, that it wasn't quite done right. So, any other questions we can handle it? Next.
Was it my impression that anybody who was not in the bid is out for the next year?
Correct. Yeah. So it's kind of locked in. Nobody can just jump in and say, hey, I want some now. No, only those that were in that and bid into it. So we're having to be very careful.
Is there any way to reduce our demand?
It is. We can go to our customers and we start doing the demand side, what's called demand side management. We go to and say, all right, your lights, are you burning LEDs? Whatever we can do to kind of reduce that amount of power that's going to be used at that very hottest day of the year. We go to our industries, we talk to them, but most of them, what we have found in the industry-wide, demand side management has been around for about 25 years because it's easier to reduce demand than it is to build generation.
Well, there's
But
demand and there's demand.
Correct.
There's demand that we have ready, and there's demand that we say we have to have. So between the three places that we get power from, how do we determine what we believe will be required to distribute that demand?
It's mainly off of history.
Okay.
It's historic usage and historic peak demands that we've had in the past.
Including weather,
Yes.
which is sort of predictable, but not.
Well, I've got a little experience with things like load shedding and turning off ACs or resistor heat water heaters, using automated online things through the NICS system or if we were to implement something like that on a citywide scale, could we say, okay, our system is going to be able to shave the demand that we're really going to need by this much if we implement all this, I call it load shedding, I'm an old school, I guess, but where we turn water heaters off selectively and nobody will know it. And it's the dead of summer and ACs are blaring and a number of water heaters are keeping that water up at 120 degrees and nobody's going to be using it in the heat of the summer until maybe the next morning. So selectively you turn them off. If something like that were implemented wide scale through our intelligent billing system, could we come out and say, okay, this is now installed, so our demand is not going to be this anymore, it'll be this.
Correct.
Is that possible to implement through?
Absolutely, it's possible. We would have to go with our current AMI, our automatic meters that we're still putting in and installing, and then it would have to be able to coordinate and work with another, more switching, et cetera. But so our current AMI is sort of a step in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Usually you have to have another device when it comes into the actual switching, et cetera. There's a lot of people that do this, and they do what beat the peak. There's programs like that where you take and you give everybody a signal that says, we're now coming into, if you will please reduce your usage from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 5 or 6. If you will not do any laundry, if you will not run your hot water, if you will take and just stay away from things best you can. That's kind of the next step. And then comes the step you're talking about, which is the automated where we end up having that control. They're available. They're not very popular because people, when they first came out, opinions change. People didn't want them in their homes because Big Brother is starting to take control of my life, and they didn't want that to happen. So there's different, we talk about smart meters. There's different levels of smart. And so what we have right now that we're implementing, we're going to be able to get information back. We're going to be able to take and you're going to be able to look at your own usage and you're going to be able to shed what you have. I believe we can take that information and start doing a voluntary load shedding. To go that next step, to do a controlled where we actually control that would be pretty expensive. We would have to look at that. If we continue to have $200 capacity cost, it will be very, very, it would meet the return on investment on that in a hurry. So that's what we have to look at.
And down the line, if people start plugging in their vehicles at 6 o'clock at night to charge them, we'll have to address that at some point. In other words, how do you plan for that kind of impact over the next 5 years or 10, whatever the number is?
Yes.
So
We have
You're
talked
right.
to, I apologize.
go ahead. No, fine.
We have also talked to a couple of our industries, the bigger ones, to see if they could do that load shedding. And most of them are not. The way their usage, their requirements, they've got to keep it going. They've got to keep the processes moving and can't have those interrupted the best they can. So, but we'll be looking at that and doing all that we can to do so. Next on the list, stormwater coordination. We continue to do that with the city, and we're going to do that today. We've got Michaela, who will give us a presentation a little bit as we're continuing to move towards our April ask of the community to help us fund our stormwater utility. Also, on cooperation with the city of Hannibal, we have a couple of, we've got Paul and we have Beverly, who have been doing some double duty, helping out. And I wanted to just bring that up to thank both Beverly and Paul for just doing that. They've really, they're burning the candle at both ends, doing a lot of work, helping out, making things run right as there's some difficulties over there. On my report, the last thing that I would share with you as we go down to the power supply on page 5 of the report, it shows us your LMP monthly averages. And I will turn this around. Sometimes it's just hard to chase it down. And you can just see it right there where you're sitting. If we would go back one more year, you'd see this nice flat line. And it was right around the $25 mark. We are now, this month, we've had several days that we've hit $100 and averaging probably 80s and around that amount just for this coming month. The amount of, I talked with a gentleman from the natural gas company next door, and they said that this is our current gas prices coming off the Henry Hub are around $7.85, and they're looking at holding that or more. The fuel costs coming in is driving that immensely, and they don't see that changing for a couple of years. So we've got some things happening there. So just to let the people know, we're going to be looking at what those costs are and making sure that we stay viable. That's all I have for my report, unless you have questions of me.
Anybody? No. All right. Operations, Matt?
Good afternoon. In my report, there's a few things I want to draw attention to. First is our electrical system outages are continuing to decline. We had 7 during the month of March. We had 3 during April, resulting in a reduction of outage minutes from approximately 450 down to about 145, 150. So applaud Jared and his efforts with tree trimming and replacement of system components to keep that outage number to a minimum. We are also in our maintenance department working to redo some of our lift station control panels. We have 16 lift stations. Historically, we went out and had a contractor do that, but that was something we brought in, trying to build some skin in the game, per se, for our crews. If they were able to build it, they could maintain it a little better, and took some pride in that. So applaud them and that effort as well. Hopefully we start installing some of those cabinets here toward the end of the month. Water production and sales are continuing to outpace the last couple of years, so that is a good thing. GEC vessels will be changed out 1st and 2nd of June. We just got confirmation of that. That'll be our first going to a quarterly schedule. So due to the lead times on everything anymore, we're having to schedule it out 3 months or so. So we're continuing to do that. With the warmer weather, we have also been able to focus more on our change out as part of our AMI project. This past month, we completed the change out of 418 water transponders. That was up from 223 that were changed out during the month of March. Focus is being put on those water meters as the old system communicated to an electric meter. We could have up to 4 water meters connected to an electric meter, and so if we go out and change an electric meter now, we may have to change out 4 water meters. So focus being, if we can change out all those water meters first, then we can go in and utilize the line crew as well to change out electric meters, and we can get through it quicker. So we're also taking advantage of times where we have to shut off a customer. When we go back to turn them back on, we'll install a new remote disconnect electric meter if we don't have to do a bunch of water meter work as well. So we're moving through there, hopefully at a quicker pace, with the anticipation of getting through this project by the end of this calendar year. Like everything else, pretty much routine for the month, unless you all have any questions.
I don't.
No. Anybody else? You want to move on to project, man?
Yep. First one I want to bring attention to is North Street. That's something that's, I think, it failed back in 2019. And so we've been working for the last year or so on getting the design of the North Street project from where the Cora project ended up through the old bridge approach. PSBA has provided us preliminary drawings on what that project would look like. We're in the process of providing comments back to them in anticipation of maybe going after some of these federal dollars to complete that project, as we have no other funding source identified at that point, or at this point. To refresh your memory, it was going to cost around the $5 million range. With the Corps doing part of the project, that reduced the cost. Also, during design, they found some other construction methods that could potentially lessen the cost. Now we're up against inflated prices and a dwindling labor market, so I don't know if we've really gained anything, but it's something that we should have a good set of plans to go out to market with should we find a funding source.
Matt, is there any part of that that's under MoDOT? None of that goes under the Mark
Nope.
Twain Avenue?
Nope. It goes up actually under the last house or two there on the north side of North Street, and goes under the old bridge approach and stays on the north side or north or east side of Mark Twain Avenue. This would relocate it out from underneath those houses and in the middle of North Street, and then get up to where the bridge approach park is, and turn and connect into a concrete box structure that was installed where the old bridge approach was.
Yeah, there's no buildings there. It's all just city park.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
The tie line between Oakwood and Southside Substation, we know what our costs are approximately for the Finn connection, so we're able to move forward with that project. Jared and some of his guys have came out with an alternative construction route, maybe looking at doing that in-house that could potentially save us money, so it's something that we're continuing to investigate. On the Finn substation project, all of our construction contracts have been awarded. We met with the line contractor last week. They're going to be on site later this week and start receiving materials. Then probably anticipated start date is mid-July on that, with a completion date of early December, which would coincide with the completion of the Ameren portion of the project as well.
Right.
And that's all I've got, unless you all have any questions.
Anybody else?
Are we coordinating with the city to anticipate the shutdown of the Southside Viaduct and rerouting traffic? I was just chatting with Andy Dorian, and they're talking about routing all that Highway 79 traffic down through the old converted place up South Main and then back up. And he said that there is a potential stormwater problem right nearby there that won't handle much more than the 25,000 pounds that's going to be going over that Bear Creek Bridge. And that's coming up January next year.
Yeah, anticipation closing would be spring of 23. Yes.
Spring, okay.
We've got PSBA looking at the structural integrity of that storm sewer. I think it's on Adams Street. They attempted to get through there late last fall and ran into some blockages, and then with high water, they've been unable to get in there again. And so they're looking at that, and that would be the only stormwater issue that there is potentially with that.
We didn't talk, we just emailed, but he said if that wasn't reliable or wasn't 100% for all the traffic, they'd be running it through across town, which would be a huge diversion for all that Highway 79 traffic.
Yeah, the main issue is the heavy truck traffic, and my understanding with the discussions with MoDOT is they're going to try to reroute a majority of the truck traffic as they can. In the event of a high river, they route a lot of it through Route V and up 79 instead of from Hannibal south. Mm-hmm. And so they're planning on doing that as well. The residential, the smaller traffic isn't as big as a concern because there's several alternatives. I mean, you wouldn't have to cross that particular storm sewer, you could go down and come up the street further to the north of Adams. I don't remember what the name of it is. Without
I
having
don't
to
know which
cross.
one Adams is, but I didn't realize it was down that far.
Yeah, it's I think 3 blocks south of Bear Creek.
Okay.
So it is something we're looking at and should have an answer on here shortly. And then if we need to make any temporary improvements to allow traffic to happen, we would have time to do so. We're also working with MoDOT on relocation of utilities around that Lion Street, Warren Barrett corridor.
Does that line up with the storm sewer that runs between Union and Fulton?
Yes,
Part of the same one?
that's where it discharges there at the east end
Okay.
or east side of Main Street. Yep.
Anything else?
I was just maybe thinking that if there's a way to have MoDOT do some fixing or repairing that, but it's way late in the game for that.
Yeah, I mean, once we get this evaluation back, we'll have something that we could go to them and see if there's temporary fixes or if it's necessary. I mean, my understanding is there's never been a condition assessment or a structural evaluation of it.
Okay.
So, or at least one that we were able to put our hands on when this viaduct discussion came about.
Okay. That's totally on your radar, though.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Hearing none, no more questions. I think you're ready.
Cute.
Paul, you're up.
Okay, good afternoon. Move right along to the finance report for the month of April. I'll kind of go through here and try to address some of Mike's question as I go along and before we start into the schedule of rates and fees. But starting with the balance sheet for April, unrestricted cash did increase again this month by about $654,000. Primarily again to a profitable month. There we go. Restricted cash increased by about $11 million on our general ledger due to the proceeds coming in from the certificate of participation lease in the electric fund. As we've talked about, we'll start spending those funds here pretty shortly as construction kicks off or is planning to kick off here in June. And we'll have some other payments that come due here over the summer. But again, those proceeds have been booked, and so those are showing up now. Long-term debt obviously increased by the same amount, so obviously a wash on the balance sheet. The first principal payment, by the way, on that note is due in April of 23. So with that new debt, utility-wide total assets were up about 10% over a month ago and about 12.7% over a year ago. Current month actual compared to budget. Utility-wide net income was about $1.1 million more than budgeted for the month. Purchase power costs were about 65% less than budgeted. So we came out really, really well with purchase power for the month. The water fund also had a good month. Revenues outpaced budget by about 5%, and operating expenses were about 12% lower than budget. That will likely not be the case either in May or June when we do this last carbon change out, as that's obviously the most significant expense in that fund. The sewer fund also had a good month. Revenues were about 4% over budget, and operating expenses were 13% below budget. So current month compared to the same time frame last year, utility-wide, our net income for the month was $789,000 more than it was a year ago. Both the water and sewer funds fared just slightly better than last year, but the electric fund did quite a bit better by about $759,000 on net income. Again, that was due to the much lower purchase power cost. Kilowatt hour sales for the month were about 2.2% more than they were last year. So it's 2 months in a row now that we've seen increases there. So year to date now through April, utility-wide net operating income is about $2.4 million more than what we had budgeted. Like Darren had said, our LMPs are up significantly, which is the cost of our daily power. And so purchase power costs year to date are actually 2.1% more than budgeted. However, those Prairie State MISO credits, that hedge that we have with Prairie State, offsets our purchase power costs, and that's 83% more than what we had budgeted. So we continue to see extreme benefit from Prairie State. So overall, our purchase power costs are about 16% less than budgeted when you include in that Prairie State credit that we get back. Revenues in the electric fund are about 1.5% ahead of budget, so pretty consistent there. Water fund is about 20% behind budget year to date. It's primarily due to operating expenses, which are 4.3% over budget. And then the sewer fund is about 7% ahead of budget. Revenues are about 3% ahead, while operating expenses are about 1.5% behind budget. Lots of percentages I'm throwing at you, but overall, utility-wide, again, we're doing quite a bit better than budget so far this year. So year-to-date actual on there compared to the same time frame last year, utility-wide, our net income is about 142% or $2.5 million more than the same time period last year. Overall, operating revenues are up about 1.6% compared to a year ago, and the about 20% decrease in purchase power this year is offsetting about a 10% increase in operating expenses. So I mentioned that we've got the proceeds now for the electric fund, and that we're beginning construction here hopefully over the next few months. And so we'll certainly start spending that money down as we go on. Let's take a little time and look at page 17, which is our balance sheet. Fourth line item on there is our fixed assets. The majority of that's our hard assets that are out throughout the city, whether it be transformers, poles, things like that, lines in the electric fund. Water is by far the most. You can see we have about $42 million of fixed assets in the water fund. Significant infrastructure there that has been built up over the years. And with that, part of the reason that we have a reserve fund is when you have $42 million in fixed assets, things are going to fail. And sometimes to the point, we hope not, but sometimes to the point of catastrophic failure, where you're talking millions of dollars to replace. And so the reason a reserve fund exists is primarily for those catastrophic types of failures in which something were to go down and would need to be replaced immediately. And so when you go back, and this is actually on page 26, when you go back to 2007, you see that almost utility-wide, we had a cash reserve amount of $3.3 million, and the water fund specifically was only $138,000. That's kind of scary to think about. If something were to happen, how are you going to pay for it? And so Matt might have to help me on some of this history, but at some point, the decision was made by the board to establish a cash reserve policy and start building reserves for those types of scenarios, which, by the way, we had that exact kind of scenario come up in the electric fund last year when Uri hit. A bill that was normally $200,000 came in at $1 million, and so we had a very immediate need to dip into reserves to pay for that. And with the water fund, there's a little bit less volatility in terms of our pricing and things like that, but there's certainly more potential for failures in our assets and things that would cause issues at the plant that would need to be replaced as soon as possible. So what happened at some point was that reserve policy was established, And then what you do, typically in the utility industry, is you hire a consultant like we did with UFS to kind of take what is industry standard. How should we be managing our reserves? Are we doing it correctly? What can we be doing better? And they base that calculation and your policy off of a kind of industry standard and what they recommend. And so for the water fund specifically, that was done in 2018. And it's the same cost of service study that we keep mentioning that UFS came and did for us then. And so at that time, they looked at our current reserves, they looked at our policy, and on page 25, you can see the requirements or the parameters, I guess, is that they laid out for us during that rate study. And so what they established was that we should have 12.3% of budgeted operating expenses, 0.5% of historical investment in fixed assets, which keep in mind is very, very high in the water fund, 90% of annual debt service, 90% of Prairie State capacity, which doesn't affect water, and then 20% of your total 5-year capital plan. All of that calculation then sets those minimum and maximum reserve requirements for each fund. And so you can see in the water fund that minimum is right at about $4 million and that maximum is right at about $5 million. And so we're sitting right there kind of in the middle of those two parameters that were set by UFS. And so the idea there is that if you were to have some type of catastrophic failure or unexpected event, $4.4 million of reserves would hopefully be enough to cover that. And I know you can ask Matt, he doesn't believe that's anywhere close to high enough, just based on the extent of the operations out there at the treatment plant and those assets and kind of how they work. But that might be another discussion. So that's kind of the background on the reserves themselves. Now, with the water fund, specifically when we did the GAC facility and we took out that debt on that facility, there were certain debt covenants that were established, and those debt covenants are put in place for investors who go out and purchase those bonds to give them a little bit of cushion, or however you want to say it, but it basically forces us to abide by these covenants so that we don't default on that debt. So it gives them some cushion, and what that was basically what we've been talking about with the electric fund. It's 125%. Your net revenues have to be 125% of your annual debt service, and that's on an annual basis. And so that calculation is constantly applying to us. And so let's look now on page 22, and we look at it every month, but that debt service coverage ratio is what is established by those bond covenants. And so I actually need to add those parentheses in for the electric fund now as well, as we're required to meet that calculation for it now as well. But in the water fund, we've looked at it every month. That requirement is 1.25 per those bond covenants. And so you can see that we're sitting right at about 1.4 for the last 2 months. And so we're meeting that requirement, but we're not by much. And as you know, we've got one more carbon change out to do. So $65,000, $75,000 worth of expense that we have yet to recognize. We're going to finish the fiscal year. What's that? Am I talking gibberish?
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, stop me if you have any questions, certainly. But so those covenants require us to meet a 1.25 ratio. In the event that we don't meet that 1.25 ratio at the end of the year, we are in default. And when you're in default, you're forced to immediately hire a consultant who would come in and basically do another cost of service study that would say, here's what you need to do with your rates to get back in line with covenants, which we already had done in 2018, and we're actually in the middle of doing right now, just to make sure that we are meeting those covenants. So when UFS did that last rate study in 2018, they laid out a rate track for us to allow us to continue to meet that reserve policy that they had established while also maintaining those debt service coverage requirements. And as we've discussed, we did 2 years in a row of rate increases in the water fund, and they had projected 5 years in a row. So we did 2 years in a row, COVID hit, and so we have done 2 years of no rate increases, and now we're getting back onto that rate track in order to make sure that we abide by those debt covenants that were established. I guess, unless anybody has any questions, that's all I've got for my finance report.
How many more years are left on that debt covenant?
Oh, that bond, we just made our first principal payment, so it's, I think it's 20.
So we have to maintain that 1.25 for 25 years.
Yeah.
We're in a lot of trouble. So, Paul, I'd like to kind of, that's kind of an answer to Mike's question. I would like to, I guess, offer Mike the opportunity to ask questions about that you had brought up earlier, about the large amount of reserves for the water fund.
Well, I see where you're at, you know, with your maximum, you're right in the middle. I don't know if it necessarily, warrants a rate change this year, but, maybe next, but, that's what you all are here for, so. Anytime you're looking at rate increases, I'm gonna ask.
Yeah.
And that's a fan, and it's really good to get it out in the public, because we've got to maintain those covenants. If we're default on that,
Thank you.
that takes us out of the running for future bonds. That takes us out of the running for the grants for the ARPA funding that we're going to talk about later. It takes and puts you into a classification that says you're not able to pay your bills.
Sure.
And that is not a good thing. Secondly, we have out at the water treatment plant just this year, we're going to take and redo the sand filters, the filters that are going and taking and prepping the water just before it goes into the GAC. And we want to protect that GAC with everything we've got. That's going to cost roughly $1 million. And so that's not, it just, everything now, it is so big, we have so much to do. The other thing we have out of and that's just on the treatment side. We also have the water that's going into the ground and pipes there. The viaduct that your question about, are we coordinating with the city? John, right on the money. Matt's already said we're going to be taking, I believe it's either a 6 or an 8-inch line that's going to be turned into a 12-inch line that we're going to be building right alongside where the viaduct is now. We've got to have that cash available to make that work. And so having that reserve in there, plus just operating where we're at, it really is. We're right in that sweet spot, but we've got to stay there. The other thing that we've got is that when UFS came up with these rates in 2018, instead of doing that one big hit all at once to get you where you got to be, we've got these small incremental steps to get us there. And that's what this is about. I think you've already we'll talk about it in a minute, I guess. We're talking about it now. What's this rate going to equate to an average user in their home?
Be $1.47 a month based on average usage of 3,300 gallons.
So, yes, it's an increase, but it really is just a small incremental step. It's almost worth only a quarter of a tank, a gallon. We won't compare it to what gas has been. Yeah, we will. Gas has gone up astronomically. We're just doing this one incremental step to help keep us in that sweet spot where we're supposed to be viable in the future.
And what's that equate to add revenue for the board?
What's that?
The increase, what's that going to increase the revenue to the board
$210,000.
per year?
That would be for if we just did the July, annually. July 1 increase would be $210,000.
I appreciate the explanation because it'll help explain that, when people ask.
Please ask. You're supposed to.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Paul? No? All right, thank you, Paul. Mike, were you satisfied?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Oh, you're still up.
Alrighty, just continuing the conversation. We revisit this schedule of rates and fees every year, right around this time frame as we get towards the end of our fiscal year. And what we do is we take the current schedule, we look at any necessary rate increases in all three funds. We look at other services that we provide on that rate schedule and kind of compare them to market, and what other entities are kind of charging. And when we redline or we make changes to that document, we redline it, we get it in front of you guys to kind of look at it and get comfortable with it, and then we go ahead and get a rate hearing scheduled so that the public can come in and comment as well. And that's kind of the process that we follow there. And so that's what you've got before you now, is that red line document, which includes only two changes. Obviously, the water rate increases are on there, as we've discussed. Those would kick or take effect July. Well, technically, if we did the rate hearing on June 20th, we're required to wait 15 days before those rates would take effect. And so that would equate out to July 5th, which coincides with our first billing of the new fiscal year. But before we get there, we mentioned this already, based on the 3.5% rate increase, it would be an increase for the average customer of about $1.47 a month there starting in July. The other change that we've got proposed on there is adding a new fee for septic hauler dumping. Right now, we charge $35 a load for dumps out at the wastewater treatment plant for septic hauling. This would be for larger loads, and specifically loads that are a little bit harder on our system to treat. And those situations are very rare. However, we needed to add in a specific fee for that, as we just weren't recouping the extra costs that those large loads cause. So you'll see that on there as well. And that charge would be 8 cents a gallon, with a maximum of $400 for that. And that's certainly in line with other entities around the state. We've looked at Municipal Sewer District, as well as a couple others to compare that to.
Paul, what kind of activity do you have with that? Like, who would that be charged to?
The most recent example was a house that flooded, and I can't remember the exact company. It might have been ServPro. Came in and backed all that up, and then that was what they were bringing to dump on us. So it's situations like that where it's just, specific type of groundwater that's got all kinds of different stuff in it that we're having to treat, and it's just not your normal, normal type of loads that we were used to.
Okay.
What do you need from us, Paul?
Yeah, so
Go ahead and schedule the rate
yeah,
hearing.
it's just those two changes, and then if you're comfortable with it, we would schedule a rate hearing before our board meeting on the 20th of June for any public comment, and then after that, we would then have you actually approve the new schedule of rates and fees at that board meeting, and then those rates would take effect July 5th. So actually, I don't think we need do we need a motion to?
We just need to say, yes, we're going to move forward with this, and if you're okay with that.
Okay.
Motion to move forward with the rate schedule.
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Paul. All right. Michaela, you're up.
First time being up here, I'm a little nervous.
Don't be.
We don't bite.
Mike button.
Matthew,
Yes,
you
you're
ready?
on.
Okay, so as Darren mentioned, I'm going to talk about some stormwater stuff. There's a decent amount of information I'm going to unpack, so I'm just going to read word for word off of everything that I typed. And if you have questions, just feel free to stop me, and myself, Darren, or Matt can address them. So the Hannibal Board of Public Works formed a stormwater department in September of 2017, and it is still currently under development. Identifying and establishing a sustainable source of funding is a top priority for this department. We strive to provide the best service within our abilities while we continue the efforts in securing a reliable funding solution. It is the department's intent to keep the public educated and informed as this utility develops. A knowledgeable community is crucial for a successful stormwater management program. Stormwater impacts everyone in some fashion, whether it's debris floating in the collection system during a rainstorm or roads becoming unpassable due to failing infrastructure. The city of Hannibal's rich history is centered around the Mississippi River. This city has continued to develop on the river for many things, such as drinking water, agriculture, transportation, and leisure activities. It is vital to do whatever is possible to ensure that the waterways in our area continue to remain a clean and viable source for our community. Our current organization's stormwater management goals and objectives are to increase community awareness of stormwater issues, decrease pollutants through the community task force, and work with local officials and the public to develop a long-term stormwater ordinance. Now, the biggest question that we get is, why does HPPW want to implement a stormwater tax? The stormwater management system throughout Hannibal has been neglected for many decades. The lack of overall maintenance and attention is going to be a very, very difficult hurdle to overcome. Our organization has been reacting to emergency stormwater situations as they arise for many years. We have been granted by our board of directors to fund these mitigations and repairs through an interdepartmental loan from the electric fund. Since that time, we were able to address immediate stormwater issues regarding safety concerns on Martin Street. The infrastructure on Martin Street was failing significantly, causing the road to be closed due to unsafe circumstances from old stormwater infrastructure. With temporary available resources through this loan, we were able to focus on the issue and make the necessary infrastructure improvements. However, this funding mechanism does not provide a proper amount of revenue stream to maintain the system adequately or to meet existing quality regulations, which will likely continue to get more stringent. Stormwater systems throughout the city of Hannibal are continuing to fail, and without a reliable source of funding, infrastructure will continue to worsen and pose an enormous safety concern for our community and citizens. With an adequate and sustainable revenue source, stormwater programs have the ability to address failing infrastructure, perform assessments throughout the system, have regular operations and maintenance schedules, define right-of-ways and proper construction standards, and implement capital projects. Funds specifically collected for stormwater will go towards engineering analysis, repairs and maintenance on storm sewers, equipment, and workforce development. It is our top priority to keep the public educated and informed as this utility develops, and we ask citizens to continue to check our website and follow our social media platforms for stormwater updates and information. Now, on our website, Matthew and I have created a new report of concern where a lot of our customers can go here and report any type of concern that they might be experiencing, like a power outage, a concern with water, and now we have a stormwater related one. So they can go on here to message us, fill out the reasoning here, and it'll generate the questions related to your concern. So you'll want to go to stormwater related, fill out this information, and it also has you put like a description of the concern and then images as well. We plan to save these images to help kind of assess the situations that we come across to kind of help educate the community based off of our stormwater needs. Now you can also go to departments and go to stormwater. And in here you'll find a wide variety of information regarding anything to do with stormwater, but you can also go down to stormwater related images. And then we've just put these up from the images that we have currently, just to show you a quick example of everything. And you can go down here and then you'll just hit this contact button and it'll take you right back to that report of concern page, and you'll just fill that out. If you come across any stormwater issues, or if you know of anybody that has these issues and maybe, we haven't contacted them back soon enough, they can go out on here, fill this out, and Matthew and I will continue to check these images and also share them with Darren and Matt as well. Any questions?
No, that's great though, because a lot of times when someone reports, we had this a lot on Patchen and a couple other areas. When somebody reports an issue, by the time we respond, the water's receded, or the storm has passed, or those type of things. So we don't get a good vision of what's going on.
Right.
So it's hard, for the board to assess. Water's running up out of the manhole back into somebody's house, or something crazy like that. So that's a great tool for people to be able to report and include images on.
Now, whenever you do submit it, they won't immediately go up on the website, just because we're going to do our due diligence to, look at the pictures, make sure it is stormwater related, and then we'll upload them if, we see fit that it is a stormwater issue.
Darren, if this is something that gets reported on your website, that through our series of meetings, we've determined is not the board's responsibility, but the city's, I'm assuming you'll pass that on to Andy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Very good point.
Any other questions?
So where are these three pictures taken at?
I believe if it's set up correctly,
That's
right?
Mark Twain
Mark
Avenue.
Twain, yeah.
Mark Twain Avenue, and this one in the middle runs along the side of the street department building.
Okay. I thought
You know where that one
I
is?
know these images by heart.
That one's Martin Street. The far left one is under Union Street.
Oh, those two aren't Mark Twain Avenue?
Do you have access to the pictures you're talking about? That'd be great to have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, please.
I think you even, did you not send around here recently to us?
I probably did.
I think you did, but yeah, I
That
definitely.
would pop up. Well, there is a part on the website that Matthew and I can add. I just found it on the picture. If you put your mouse just right, it brings up the address of those, and we'll check that just to make sure that that happens for each of the ones that we upload for questions such as that. So
That's
And
great.
we are going to advertise, like she said, we're going to advertise this on the other social media options that we have. We're going to get it out there, try and drive as many people here, get those pictures. We're going to, luckily, Kayla and Matthew, to make sure nothing inappropriate gets posted, and we'll go from there.
Run it by James and let James evaluate. No.
Sorry, I know that's not funny, but I believe James actually helped us with the disclaimer, so we've tried to do it right. We're trying to do it just as appropriate as possible, but we also hope this gets people to where they're thinking about it, and it becomes an item where they want to have it fixed as well.
yes, and that is why we put that disclaimer on there too, is that we're not obligated to pertain to these duties, especially if the images do not relate to stormwater.
Any questions, folks?
That's great.
I think it's great.
Thank
I
you.
do too. Very nice. James, it did bring something up that maybe you can answer. How long can our $1 million loan sit out there in limbo without us taking some action to repay it?
I don't know that there is a specific statutory answer to that. However, what I would suggest to you is this. There is a fiduciary obligation to pay it back in a reasonable period of time when you have the capability to do so. If you are still proceeding where you are attempting to obtain a funding source that we believe would be approved in regards to a court challenge, I think you're probably still going to be on track. However, if at some point you decided, well, there's no way we're going to ever be able to pay it back, we would have to have a discussion regarding how we're going to proceed. So that's my lawyer answer for we're probably still okay, but keep an eye on it.
Let's keep things moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, basically, there is nothing that says that you can't borrow one fund from another. What the issue would be is that if someone challenges it and says, well, you haven't required a payback, and we expect it to be payback, and how's there going to be a payback? Well, as a general rule, the way you enforce something like that is you would call the note due, and you would obtain a judgment, and then you would levy on assets. So what's the electric department going to do? Levy on some storm sewers and sell them? The point is, I don't know that there's a practical method of enforcing repayment until such time as there's a funding source, unless, and I'm not advising this, unless what could happen, I suppose, is a court could come in and say, okay, ultimately, the money has to be repaid to the fund because ratepayers are not exactly the same as taxpayers. Therefore, we're going to give a judgment in general against the city and the Board of Public Works. We're going to require that money to be repaid with interest in order to be fair to the ratepayers. We don't care.
And you end up with a fund-to-fund transfer anyway.
Exactly.
So
it's one of those things where the best thing to do is obviously not let ourselves get to that situation.
Okay, thank you. All right. Amended 2019 stormwater policy. Darren, you're up.
All right, well, what James just said, we're going to continue with our good faith effort in funding that and making sure it goes away. I have before you the policy that was agreed upon in May of 2019. It is a maintenance responsibility of stormwater systems, and this was a policy that was written that helps define what is the city's responsibility when it comes to stormwater and what is the BPW's responsibility as it refers to stormwater. The city now has a funding source that they've got for some of their infrastructure needs, and they're going to be able to work on things. If you were to take a ground level look, pretty much everything that is above ground is the city's responsibility, and everything that's below ground is our responsibility. However, we have a few things that we're very expert at. We handle pumps and we do those things on a very regular basis. And so there are a few things that we have now tweaked. And if you want to look at the red line in your packet, this is on page number 47 is where this begins. So you go all the way down to the bottom. We've made a couple of tweaks. One is in guidelines. It used to say the public versus the private, and we thought it was just a little kinder to say that the public and private responsibilities as that's divided out. And so it talks in there as to what's MoDOT right-of-ways, how the city has responsibility, things that are above ground and on private, not on private, only if there is a right-of-way they would have that responsibility. So this helps define what theirs are. It then goes on to describe what is the Department of Public Works, which is the city's Department of Public Works, and the BPW's responsibilities. Here's where we have made a couple of changes. We have added to the city's responsibility on item number 2. It used to state that the city was responsible for gates A, B, and D, and we were responsible for the other gates. We have now said, you know what, the gates are theirs. So they're going to be taking care of all of the gates. Pretty much they've got some gaskets to replace and some of those things, but that will be the responsibility of the city. On the HBPW responsibilities, there's been 2 changes. 1, actually 3, so we then gave that responsibility of the gates to the city. 5 and 6 are added. Let me read all the 1 through 6. 1, below ground conveyance systems. Again, anything that goes below ground, that becomes ours. Inlet structures. So the actual boxes themselves, if those start to fall in or cave in, those are our responsibility. Stormwater manholes. Those are also, you have pipes that go to a manhole after X amount of time. You have to be able to have access to longer runs. That's what the manholes provide. Bear Creek Dam will continue to be our responsibility. Number 5, flood wall pumps, pump station, and associated items. These are the pumps that are down that are in place so that if there is flooding, if there is large amounts of stormwater where we actually have to start pumping that water into the Mississippi to protect our downtown, we're responsible for those pumps. And again, pumps are something that we are expert at, and that will become our responsibility. Number 6, culverts under roadways only. We recognize that this is a definition that we wanted to be a little more specific on. One of our questions and thoughts was, what's the difference between a culvert versus a bridge? So we've talked to MoDOT, and MoDOT has given the following, as you can see per the asterisk. Per MoDOT definition, a culvert is less than 20 feet, and a bridge is 20 feet or greater. Well, a culvert also, the roadway is supported by dirt over top of the culvert. If it is a bridge, all you have is a culvert plus concrete or metal or something that is solid. If there is soil above that, that is a culvert. And so this helps make that definition. This is a very important step towards our April 2023 election, where we're going to go to the citizenry and ask them for funding. And that step is just having a very clear, defined line of responsibility that's going to be the HBPWs. With this, we're going to be able to get a rough estimate of what the costs are for operating, maintaining capital projects for our system, and then we're going to be able to come up with a reasonable assessment. And so this is a very important step in that. And so it is my request that we go ahead and that you consider this, approve it, and then we will take it to the city and ask them for their approval as well.
Somebody who doesn't know anything about culverts or bridges is going to say 20 feet wide, deep, tall.
Long.
Very good. Okay, it is long, but yes, we can clarify that language good point. And I would also ask, I think, I don't know if James I think you probably looked at the first iteration of this, but if you have changes such as that, if we want to have James make any changes as to form, we could do that, but I think it's okay the way it is.
I'm fine with the form as it is, as long as.
Sounds good.
As long as everybody's in agreement, that's what you're doing. I think it's clear. I think it lays it out.
And thank you for the point. This has been created with myself and with the city manager, Lisa, and with Andy Dorian having their input on it as well, and Matt. And Mike has also been in the room. So this is something that I believe we can absolutely say we have the support of the city on this as well. I don't know if it's appropriate. Mike, is that okay to make that statement?
I think so.
Okay.
So what is the 20 feet? Is it width, length?
It's length.
Length.
So these culverts are horizontal. So they don't, so it would be a horizontal run under a roadway that makes it that's the definition we're looking for, is either bridge or culvert. If it's 20 feet or less underneath the roadway, dirt on top of it, that's a culvert. And that's ours. That's our baby.
Okay. Gotcha.
So what's the revision date of May 20 of this year? Is that designated for some vote date or something?
It is not. It's what I put on there. I apologize. So it would be as of this date. Actually, we'd probably wait and get it to the city, and when the city approved it, that would be the official revision date. Is that what I would consider?
So do we need to make the 20-foot change or add the length in there before we approve this, or can
You
we?
could do it as amended. You can verbally amend and then amend the writing later if that's what you want to do.
So technically, a culvert is something that conveys water less than 20 feet.
Yes.
Or no,
20
the
less.
traffic going over it is less than 20 feet.
Correct.
So it doesn't matter how big the culvert is. It's the traffic that goes over it, above it. Okay.
And again, so the structure, if that culvert is actually part of the structure holding the road up, that is a bridge. If that culvert is not holding up the road, but has dirt over the top of it, that is a culvert. So. Okay. Because we're not experts in bridges. We can't do that.
Motion to approve the maintenance responsibility of stormwater systems
As amended.
as amended.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, second, please. Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
There you go.
Thanks for your work. That's helps a lot.
Thank you. It's a great step, I think. We're doing good things.
We'll just have to make sure that in 25 years, we have funding to replace those 3 pumps that were just replaced.
You are correct. And again, here is another reason why we have that reserve fund. Those pumps today, Matt, what's one of those pumps cost? What did it cost for the Army Corps to put those in?
They were looking at replacement about $350,000.
Per pump? Total, okay.
So that would have to come out of the stormwater fund in 20 some odd years, whatever.
And you have to look at the amortization of that. So you're going to take and amortize it. You're going to actually put that cash away. You're going to hold it. That would be part of that reserve fund. And so
That might be important to the businesses downtown.
it just might be.
They might like to have that reserve fund.
Well, hopefully you'll have a community improvement district, then, and, you can always argue with the,
There was
Army
one,
Corps of Engineers on
Martin Street
responsibility,
when it
like,
first started.
which
Oh, yeah,
just got
yeah.
done.
Martin Street.
Yeah. No, all those things are in play. And so
It's all-
I once had someone say it's always more
That was
difficult or a little more complicated than you
They're
think.
all
So
underneath.
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
But there's
you.
that.
Okay, the last thing on the list is resolution authorizing ARPA funding.
We have just gotten the word, that the state has finally done the appropriations and all of the setting out of the rules for the ARPA money. That money has now gone to our state agencies, and we're going to be able to apply in the next 60 days. This is only open for 60 days for us to go through and look for funding from that ARPA money for water projects, sewer projects, stormwater projects, and lead inventory projects. One of the requirements of this, now here's a side note. These are all competitive bid projects. We have several that we're looking at, and we're going to be applying for those. Part of them is that you also have to have a match. And so with that match, we have to take some of that monies, the reserves, those reserves we have in the water, make that part of the match as we go forward to get some of the project money. That's just kind of a side note. Please put that in the back of your mind and remember that's what we are doing. The other thing that we must have is we have to have a resolution that says you as a board have authorized us to go get this ARPA money. And that is what you have before you. You have a resolution that is saying you as a board have given the general manager the authority to go after funding, and that it's not binding. In other words, we can still say no, you still have that right and authority to do that. But this is a document that you have authorized us as a utility to go after that funding. And it's as simple as that, but we have to have it in place in order to do so.
Is there a
Yes.
document somewhere?
It's at the very end of your
I'm sorry,
page 49 and 50.
Sorry, thanks.
Did they settle on a percentage match?
No, they did not. They said it could be whatever you want to offer up. Now, remember, these are competitive. So there's approximately $411 million in money that came to the state. You have several communities, and we're going to be competing with them. And so with that match, they said, you can do $1, you can do 1%, 5%, 10, 20, 50. But recognize that that's part of the competitiveness comes into what is the condition of your community, what's the needs. All of those things are going to be taken into consideration. So I don't want to put any unrealistic expectations out there, but we have some projects that we want to look at and are going to try for.
Including the lead abatement.
We're going to, the inventory. So they have said that none of this is available for lead abatement.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up, very serious. But we can do the lead inventory. So we're considering that as well.
All right, do we have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved for the resolution as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Can I apologize, I'm gonna interrupt?
Yep.
Discussion.
Do you see anything in this resolution that
You're
does
approved.
not work?
You're approved as to form.
Thank you.
I reviewed it, it's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, your resolution is passed. I see where I need to sign this as well,
Thank you.
and I will take care of that for you if you've got it.
We do.
Okay. I thought you might. Okay. Comments from the city attorney.
I have no additional comments.
Well, thank you, James. Any general discussion?
Corey, do you have any interesting updates that would be talk aboutable?
No, probably not today, although I would say, I guess, I appreciate Darren and Matt and Paul taking time to meet with Sparklight Metal recently, because there were some concerns over some discussion about rates, potential rate increases and those kind of things, so I appreciate them taking the time to call and meet with them, share information with them. We get obviously lots of questions about that, as you all talk about that, people see these meetings on YouTube, so I do appreciate it. Potential calculations that they can work with from their budgeting perspective.
Cool.
Do we have a designated person responsible for big customer coordination, main contact, or do they just contact who they want to?
A lot of them have their own relationships that they've already developed. So like Paul with Spartan, that's pretty good. They've got a wide open communication to do that. Some key accounts, you've got people, Matt, the same. So it's really not as formalized, but we've got them all communicated.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we don't have like 1,000 key accounts, so there's not a requirement to have anything formalized, obviously. Thank you.
Any other general discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
That's good.
Aye.
Put that on.
Thank you.